Hello, this is going to be a break from sort of my normal style of video, whatever that is, and an attempt at creating a sort of guide for modding the Axis Allies RTS for 2004. I know it's a very old game, but there's quite a bit of mods out there for it, and there's still quite a bit of modding going on for the game. And so in the context of that, I thought I would try to make some guides to help modders or people who are interested in possibly modding this game utilize aspects of the game code which I feel go sort of unnoticed or underutilized by most active modders and most active mods out there right now. And I think chiefly among those underutilized aspects of the game code is the ability priority system, which I'll be going over in this video. That'll be the main focus of this video. However, we're going to start out by doing a quick overview of abilities and ability definition and how that affects the ability template. So, first off, what do I mean by ability? Well, I'm referring to the ability template in the actor ability file in the templates folder. And when I say ability, pretty much anything that applies an effect on the environment or upon actors in the game, and which is not a technology, is an ability. So special ops, those are abilities that use the same template, same basic template as your individual actor attack. A rifle shot and the atomic bomb come from the same sort of place code-wise in Axis Allies, even though one's being used by an actor, one of them is a special op ability. And so the main difference between abilities, between the rifle shot and the atomic bomb, is the ability definition. Ability definitions go inside the ability. If you do not have an ability definition inside the ability, it just isn't doing anything. And also, some of the core functionality of an ability and how it works relies upon information within the ability definition code within that template. But for now, we will be looking over the ability template itself. I've cut this into 3 parts because it is a big template. However, most of this is fairly straightforward, and in some cases I would argue even irrelevant to modding this game. First thing that comes to note if you're looking at this on the screen is the 5 different animation strings here. In Axis Allies, you're only going to be using animation 1 and idle animation, just as a given. The reason you have animation 1 through 5 is if you had other animations to use, you can have the actor using the ability cycle randomly through these 5 possible animations. I think this was used in the Kohan 2 game, which uses the same engine as Axis Allies, so that you don't have the same melee sword attack animation every time. So that's nice, but insofar as nobody's created any new KF animations for Axis Allies or for Kohan 2 to my knowledge, but relevant to Axis Allies, I don't think you'll be using any of these animation sets. Idle animation, that is the animation which plays after the ability has been used, for example, or during the ability wait, if the ability is waiting to be used again, essentially, which would mean after the ability. But That's stuff like the infantryman that's holding up, the rifle in between shots. That's stuff like saboteur being kind of hunched over in between his attacks, or infantry that have just thrown a grenade. They kind of have the same sort of hunching pose. That's the idle animation. When a unit switches to a new ability to use it, then it uses the animation for the new ability. And so normally you don't have the idle animation using very much. It's usually a pretty brief thing. Spawn position, I'd say pretty much obsolete code. I think it was obsolete even in Kohan 2. There's really no point where you'd ever use this, but if you did for whatever reason want to, it is relatively straightforward if you just read the text in the template. Same with Spawnbone IDS. This is normal. This is what you're using most of the time in Axis Allies. And again, it's fairly straightforward. You're just referring to a bone or node in the NIF model of whatever actor is using the ability. So, and the bone lists the ID of individual bones or nodes. All that's stored within the game folder of Axis Allies in I forget the name of the file, but it's pretty straightforward, and I think you shouldn't have any problem finding it. Of more importance, of more interest to this video, to whoever's watching this video, is the ability prioritization system. Now, reading this, it is relatively straightforward as well, but there's some depth to it that is not quite understood. But in the short term, we can just go over here the values we have. We have priority, we have the move weight, use weight, wait weight, always annoying to say, and then we have the action bonuses, the move bonus, use bonus, and weight bonus. Now, the bonuses are all 0 here, and the weights are what has been given prominence and numerical values, but in practice, you will find the bonuses are far more useful than any of the other values given here, including priority itself. I would say priority should be 1 most of the time, and I should say the vanilla values for the weights should also be used. There are very rare situations where I would argue for changing the weight values around. It's a multiplier essentially for, we'll be going over this later, but for check damage resistance and how that plays into ability prioritization. In the scope of this video, I only use it with regard to the bonus values, to move bonus, use bonus, weight bonus, etc. But theoretically, if you wanted to use the check damage resistance system, but wanted to add even more weight to some specific ability without using the bonus values, just as a multiplier, you could. But that's outside the scope of this video. I've never really messed around with that because the bonus values are generally sufficient for modding this game. But we will go over this in more detail shortly. Finally, as part of the ability template, we have fuzzy range. This is a fairly important value. In the base game, it's mostly used with regard to infantry, and that's where it is most useful. This is a basically a variation value that is added or subtracted to the range as defined in the ability definition of the ability. So let's use again an infantry example. An infantry rifle in Axis Allies, I think the vanilla value is 12. It has a range of 12. It may be 10 for some units, but we're going to go with 12 for this example. If you have a fuzzy range value of, I think it's either 2 or 3 in vanilla, but we're going to use 2 just for this example. then what's going to happen is either 2 will be added to that range of 12, making the range 14, or 2 will be subtracted from that value of 12, making the range 10. Now this is applied basically once. I don't know if it's applied when the unit is first created, or I don't know if it is applied when the ability is first used by that unit, but once this value has been applied to this ability, to the ability definition, it's permanent. In other words, this isn't something that will change with each shot. You know, a unit that's been given a range of 14 by fuzzy range, it's not going to randomly change back to 12 or randomly change to 10 while that unit is alive. It will always be 14. So that limits the usefulness of this value somewhat. The main reason that this is here, I feel, is just to make infantry squads spread out more. Otherwise, everyone would kind of form this line or semicircle around whatever they're shooting at because their ranges would all be identical. And that's bad both on a visual perspective, but also from a balance perspective, because infantry that all gather up in a line or a row, which are all in the same place, are even more vulnerable to area of effect weapons. So there's good reason why that's there, but don't expect much from it. Turret IDS, very straightforward. This simply defines what turret is using this ability. Turret names, just like the spawn bone IDS, all of these bone names come from a file or two inside the game folder. Very straightforward. Corresponds to a place on the model, a node on the model specifically. Required properties. Actually, I should have mentioned this earlier. This is another aspect of the game, and actually this is used in vanilla by the USA Bomber, the napalm tech. It enables the napalm ability in the USA Bomber through this line of script here. Basically, if the properties required here, under required properties, if those properties are present on the unit, and they must be on the unit, you may have noticed if you mod this game that required technologies for units, to produce a unit, they're not actually required to be applied to the HQ10. Like, for example, the sniper rifles tech in vanilla, that property for unlocking sniper infantry is applied to the infantry HQ, which is what produces the infantry. So that makes sense, right? What produces, the sniper infantry. But if we were to move the sniper infantry to the mechanized HQ, or the armor HQ, or the airborne HQ, even though the technology to unlock sniper infantry has only been applied to the infantry HQ, you can still produce it from any other building which has them assigned to it, so long as that technology has been researched. Just as long as you have it. It doesn't matter if it is something that actually shows up on the building. That's not true for this. Required properties, in order to be valid, in order for the required properties requirement to be fulfilled for abilities, that property must be present on the actor which is using the ability. So, going back to the USA Bomber example, if the napalm technology was applied only to the airfield, to kind of show, I guess, to enemy players, hey, this side, this player has researched napalm, then the napalm isn't actually going to work. The napalm technology in that case would have to be applied to the bomber that is using it, that requires the napalm tech. Otherwise it won't work. But you can use this for so many things. In my own mods, I've had, Panzerfaust technology. I've had that enable, Panzerfaust attacks for German infantry. I've had it be used for rifle grenades. Instead of the rifle grenade technology unlocking a new unit, it just unlocks a ability on the infantryman. There's a lot of ways you can use this. Very useful. Just keep in mind that whatever the technology is, it has to be applied to the actor that requires it. It can't just be researched in general, like with unlocking units. Required experience, min and max, this is very straightforward as well. Just remember, as it kind of says here, the number value assigned to these fields is referring to the level of veterancy that the unit has. So, like, it takes 150 experience for a infantry regiment to reach, the first level of experience, or veterancy, whatever you want to call it. But you do not put down 150 into, if you wanted to have an ability unlocked at level 1. Okay. Required experience min would then be a 1. It wouldn't be 150, it would just be 1, because it's talking about the level itself and not the experience required for that level. In this sense, you can't have it where it unlocks the ability at a certain point, experience, with a certain experience value. It doesn't work like that. This solely goes off of level. This may seem obvious to the listener or watcher of this video, but I've made the mistake where I thought, oh, this is a cool field. I'll use it to unlock, this ability at, 50 experience. Put in a 50 in there. It's not going to work. No, it corresponds to level and not to experience itself. Next, we have cost faction experience. Again, very straightforward. This is how your special op abilities work. They cost a certain amount of experience, like courage, I think costs, 300? Or fighting spirit, whatever you want to call it. Very straightforward. Cost template, cost list. This is so you can have abilities cost actual money to use. I do not recommend this. I do not recommend you use this. It would be kind of cool if like a bombard ability, if it perhaps instead of a cost, it was an upkeep, where you had as long as the ability was active, it used a certain amount of ammo resource. But as for the money one, which is the only option you have, you can't use upkeep, only cost. For one, I've used this once. It doesn't seem to stop an ability from being used. Like, let's say you only have 15 money, right? And let's say the ability costs 100 money. It'll still use the ability. It'll just set you back to zero money. But it'll still work. It's not a great system. It doesn't seem to work properly, and if I remember correctly, it doesn't even show the money cost. I may be wrong there. It's been a long time since I've used it, but in general, I do not recommend using it. So, we've gone over the ability template. Took a while, didn't it? But we're finally onto the meat of this video, the reason why I made this video to begin with, and that is priority and how it works with the check damage resistance flag in the performer component. So, how can I use ability priority? We're going to be looking at another example from vanilla, and that is the USA Infantry Marine, or just the Marine. mostly used in the Allied campaign for the USA missions at the end. This is you've ever wondered why Marines have this bayonet attack, and it's the most useful attack they have. It does 15 damage. It's very rapid. You know, they're using it constantly. It's faster than the rifle, certainly faster than the grenade. But Marines never run into a position to use it. They never charge with their bayonets. It's just sort of a passive thing they have where if they're in range to use the bayonet, they use it. But they won't actually get into range to do it. I'm sure if you've played Axis and Allies, like I have, you've tried at one point, you had some of these missions, you just run the Marine regiment up to whatever bunker or whatever building you're trying to stab to death, because otherwise they won't do it. And there's a reason why that is. It's because of the priority system. Here is the bayonet attack, the ability inside of the Marines file, USA Infantry Marine.tgi. We see at the top here our good friends move bonus and use bonus. Move bonus is set to 0. Now, as you might guess, that means that the unit has no priority to actually move into place to use the ability. Whereas the use bonus of 110 means if they are in a situation where they can use this ability, they will use it. And they will be incentivized to use it before any other ability. Now, this is the template which that ability inherits from. It's a little bit curious, actually, that the developers of Axis and Allies even put in custom values in the Marines bayonet attack to begin with, because the melee local ability, which it inherits from, has essentially the same values. Move bonus 0, use bonus slightly lower, but pointlessly so. And weight bonus is also 0. So, you might be saying, okay, well, that's somewhat interesting, but the main reason that I bring this up is so I can move on to how this relates to the other abilities which the Marine has, in order to further explain its behavior. This is the gun local template. So this is what the rifles, what all the individual firearms used by infantry in Axis and Allies, what they are inheriting from. And you can see most of the values at the top, priority, move, use, weight, they're all essentially the same. And they should be. I wouldn't recommend really changing those values around. It's kind of pointless to do so. But the bonus values are all different. Move bonus is set to 3, which is sort of unnecessary given that the rifle or submachine gun or what have you attack used by infantry is typically the longest range ability that they have to begin with. But use bonus is 50 and weight bonus is 50. I should say use bonus obviously is the how imperative it is that this ability be used, especially in the order of what ability to use at a given time, if all those abilities are capable of being used. Weight bonus, on the other hand, is how long do we keep this ability active. This goes back to the idle animation. How important is it that we simply wait to use this ability again, instead of using another ability which might be available? This is something, again, somewhat underutilized in the base game. But this can be very important when it comes to when and in what situation any given ability is used. For example, you can use this to prevent, in some cases, perhaps infantry from running off to throw a grenade at something. Instead, just wait to fire their shot again. And you can do that without messing with the move bonuses, which might otherwise cause the infantry to not want to move into range to use their grenades, regardless of whether or not it would be a good target to do so. Now, looking at this, you may wonder why, whenever you're playing with infantry in Axis Allies, the infantry, instead of using their rifles once they're in range, they will simply run all the way, not shooting their weapons, to throw a grenade, heedless of all the machine guns shooting at them, sometimes causing them to die without dealing any damage at all. And that is because the grenade ability template, a grenade local, has a move bonus of 75, which is much higher than the weight bonus or use bonus of the gun ability. Now, use bonus is also 75, so it is more incentivized to use the grenade as long as it is available. Weight bonus of 1 is basically irrelevant. This is why infantry behave as they do. This is why they rush to throw that grenade. And this is also why, well, that's why it works like that. Okay, so this may seem somewhat straightforward, and even without using check damage resistance, there's some things that can be changed here already to, in my opinion, improve infantry capability. Like, for example, change the use bonus for rifles for the gun ability to, I don't know, 80, something a little bit higher than the grenade and move bonus. That means infantry will take their first shot with the rifle, or however many shots if they can use it again. But while that rifle ability is on recharge, in between shots, they will move forward because of that move bonus being higher than the weight bonus of the gun ability to throw their grenade, to get into range to throw it, rather. And that can be, in my opinion, much more useful behavior on the part of infantry. So that way they'll be doing chip damage with their rifles as long as they are able to, instead of not using their rifles and instead focusing on trying to get into grenade range, no matter what. Relatively small change, though. How can we make things even more intelligent? How can we improve on this? I have the infantry marine thing here again. And again, the move bonus here is 0, use bonus 10. But check damage resistance. You may have seen this in the performer components of anti-tank units, especially. Anti-tank infantry, also I think tanks in general, tank destroyers certainly. What check damage resistance does is, if you have check damage resistance set to true inside the performer component, the abilities will look at their ability definition. That's, if you look here, that's where the damage value is given, that's where range usually is, that's where recharge time usually is, area of effect, the name of the ability, all that's in ability definition. And so if you have this enabled, if you have this set to true, the abilities will look at what their damage effect is. There has to be a damage effect in it for this to work. And of course, ability definitions can only have one damage effect. And those in the base game are explosive, gunfire, flame, and armor piercing. It'll look at what damage effect the ability is doing, and then based on the target, what you're using the ability on, based on the target's resistances and vulnerabilities to those types of damage, it will change the priority, especially the bonus values of that ability, so that abilities which would be the most effective based upon the damage resistance values given, will be incentivized. It also means, in terms of targeting, that the actor will try to use its abilities on whatever they would be most effective against. So, for example, the reason why anti-tank units have this enabled is so that anti-tank units will prioritize targeting units that, in this case, do not have a resistance to armor piercing. So they would try to use their bazooka, for example, if it's a USA anti-tank infantry with a bazooka, he will try to use his bazooka on vehicles or tanks as opposed to infantry, because infantry have a 20% resistance to armor piercing. So let's try and look at an example of this. This is the intrinsic property for vehicles. This is what every vehicle in the game has. It's what defines them as a vehicle when it comes to target flags, which I could have gone over that as a part of the ability definition. It just governs what the ability can be used on. Like the Goliath can only target vehicles and buildings, because the ability can only target actors with certain target flags. But that's irrelevant for this example. What's important here is the resist damage modifiers. Vehicles resist in the base game. They resist 40% gunfire damage. They resist 20% of explosive damage, like grenades, artillery, etc. So we have those values there. We look back at the template for gun abilities in Axis Allies, and we see, move bonus 3, use bonus 50, weak bonus 50. If we have check damage resistance enabled on the actor that has this ability, those bonuses, those values, will effectively change to the ones given here. The move bonus of 3 becomes 1.8. The use bonus of 50 becomes 30. Weight bonus also 30. That is because the priorities are now realizing they have to contend with the resistances of the target, taking into account how effective this ability will be. Now, it is important to note that the ability will not check, it will not factor in how much damage is being done, only the damage type and the damage resistance of the target. So this attack could be doing 1,000,000 damage, conceivably, right? It could be the most effective one that the unit has, but if check damage resistance sees that the target has 50% damage resistance, it's still going to think, okay, well this is probably going to be less effective than another ability it might have, which does 10 damage, but uses a different damage type than the resistance of the target. Hopefully that makes sense. So here you see the bonuses are reduced, and what that means is if you have another ability, like I was saying, we'll look at an example later, it'll prioritize using the one that does not have resistance, assuming that the bonus values are all the same. So let's look at that also for the grenade, right? The grenade's reduction is not only smaller, but since the base values are also higher to begin with, this really doesn't change the behavior of the infantry unit here. But 75 becomes 60, and 1 becomes 0.8 because of that 20% resistance the vehicle has. So, okay. No real change in behavior here. That's kind of boring, isn't it? Well, okay, we're going to construct now a hypothetical infantry unit. This infantry unit has 2 gun attacks. Say it has a rifle. One of them does 12 pierce damage. The other one does 12 armor piercing damage. Both of them use the vanilla gun local ability template. That means both of them have, a priority of 50 to, or a use bonus of 50, and a weight bonus of 50. That means that if we had check damage resistance off, they would fire one attack and then immediately fire the next against the same target. There'd be no factoring in resistances whatsoever. But because we have check damage resistance set to true, we have a situation where when it comes to infantry units, the unit, in this case, this hypothetical unit that we have constructed here, will be using its infantry rifle ability with pierce damage over the one with armor piercing. In fact, because of the weight bonus for the rifles being so high, there's a good likelihood that this unit would not use the armor piercing ability at all against infantry units because of the weight bonus that's assigned to the gun local ability template. And because the armor piercing ability has its use bonus lower, because it would be multiplied by 0.8 because of the armor piercing damage resistance of infantry. Because the weight bonus of the pierce damage attack is higher than the use bonus of the armor piercing one, it may not use the armor piercing attack at all. It would save that, as it were, for a vehicle target, which may or may not exist. On the other hand, goes the same way with vehicles. If there is a vehicle target in the area, because of the damage resistance that vehicle has to pierce damage, it would only use, most likely, the armor piercing ability defined here against the vehicles, and if there were no infantry around, it would not use its normal attack, most likely, because the normal attack's use bonus value would be lower than the weight bonus of the armor piercing ability. Here we've changed things up a bit. This, you might see, more closely reflects the vanilla infantry marine ability. This sort of negates the check damage resistance because, as you can see, the normal attack has its bonuses unchanged, of course. But the armor piercing attack has a move bonus now of 0, meaning it will never try to get into range to use it, and has a range that is significantly lower than normal. The use bonus, however, is higher at 100. So in the same vein as the vanilla marine, it would only ever use the armor piercing attack when in range, but it will also always use it despite check damage resistance being set to true, because the use bonus, even multiplied by the damage resistances of, say, infantry, 20%, that would leave use bonus at 80, which would still be higher than the weight bonus of 50 of the normal attack. So, in this case, despite check damage resistance being true, the use bonus is so high that this unit would effectively behave as normal if check damage resistance was set to false. The main difference would be that the infantry would try to use their normal attack on infantry first because of the it would be a more appealing target because of the damage resistance situation. Here we have another variant, and this will be the last one, just to go over again the ramifications of the check damage resistance flag being set to true. Here we have, again, a reduced range armor piercing attack and the normal infantry rifle attack at the range of 10. But the normal attack now has the weight bonus of 50 displayed here for demonstration purposes. And the armor piercing ability has had its move bonus, which in vanilla, because it's a gun local ability, has a move bonus of I think 3. In this case it's been increased to 50. So what does this mean? Unlike the previous example, which used the Marine, bayonet setup with a move bonus of 0, in this case, if the infantry unit, the hypothetical unit we have here, if it has a target which is resistant to its pierce damage attack, its normal attack, top here, it will move into range to use its armor piercing attack, because the move bonus of 50 in that case will be higher than the weight bonus of the normal attack. In the same vein, if this unit were only attacking infantry, it would never move into range to use its armor piercing attack against enemy infantry, because the move bonus of 50 used by the armor piercing attack would be reduced by the damage resistance of the infantry targets. So this is an example of how using ability priorities, specifically the bonus values assigned to priority, and the check damage resistance tag, we can make our basic combat units much more intelligent in how they use their abilities and when. I understand this has been a long video. Hopefully it has been an informative one. I do intend to make more like it at some point, hopefully not as long as this one, but this is sort of it's a very important concept for modding this game, but it is a tedious one to go over, and it is one where you will probably have to do a little bit of trial and error to get things working the way you want them. I would advise, as I have in my own mods lately, that you actually try to create new damage types, which is something I might go over in a future video, so that you can use this system of priority modification enabled by check damage resistance to its greatest effect. For example, having a dedicated melee damage type means we could have bayonet charges that only are used against infantry targets, and perhaps only even in certain situations by using terrain modifiers which might increase or decrease damage resistance or vulnerability to certain damage types. For example, maybe you have your grenade attack. Let's use it has a hypothetical new damage type of its own that is just for grenades, a grenade damage type, right? If we have a setup where the grenades do, relatively less damage than they do right now, less effective overall, so it doesn't make sense to run out, or maybe infantry combat's more lethal in general. We have a system where perhaps infantry don't run up to use their grenades whenever possible, and instead, by using a priority system that is lower than the priorities of the rifles, and damage resistance to rifle attacks when in cover, per se, we could create a situation where our infantry only rush out to use their grenades against enemies that are in cover, and therefore enemies which rifle fire would be less effective against. It's stuff like that, where you can create a new level of depth, a new dynamic of combat in this game. This can also be applied to vehicles and tanks and the like, where you could conceivably have a tank that has multiple different shells to fire from its main gun, and which prioritizes the use of certain shells against certain targets. You could even use a reload time value, which we saw when we were going over the ability template, inside of the individual abilities, not the ability definitions, mind you, but within the ability area, where we have the bonus values here, so that the tank would have to wait between firing rounds based on that reload time, instead of simply firing one round and then the next after. Reload time is actually pretty important. I should have gone over it earlier in this video. If you have a reload time inside of the ability, we can go back here. The reload time value, I guess I skipped over it. The reload time value inside the ability, what that does is if the ability is fired, the ability is used, it will not be able to use any other abilities within the performer component until that reload time is elapsed. A good example would be if you ever play with the Katyusha rocket truck for Russia in the vanilla Axis Allies game, you may notice that it fires all of its rockets at the exact same time, like a shotgun or something. I always found that kind of annoying, so what I would do is I would add a reload time of 0.1 seconds to all of the rocket abilities in the rocket truck. And what that would do is it would mean every time the rocket truck used one of its rocket abilities, of which it had 5, it would not be able to use any of the other abilities for 0.1 seconds. Therefore, it would sort of stagger the rockets out a little bit. Very useful in that context, and it would also be very useful in the hypothetical situation with the multiple tank shells that I laid out. The only problem with reload time is, again, it disables all abilities in the performer component for the duration of the reload time. So that means in the example with the tank gun, that hypothetical example, if the tank had a machine gun ability as well as these different types of tank shells, the machine gun would also be disabled for the duration of the reload time when one of the tank shells that has a reload time in the ability was fired. So that limits its usefulness somewhat. There's also the issue that reload time is not modified by ability recharge buffs from technologies or special ops. So it's not a perfect system, but it can be useful, and if you intend to try and make tanks use different tank shells, I would say this is the best way to do it because of, well, unless you have like really high weight bonus priorities, perhaps. Even that's not perfect, though. That would be the best way to go about doing it. But hopefully this video has been useful. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll try to get to them. I may not get to them immediately, but I will try to get to them. And if you also want me to make a video on any given subject in Axis Allies modding, I will also try to do that based on requests. I have been kind of busy lately and will probably be busier in the future, but I always do try to get back to this channel and see if there's any comments or new interest in certain things. But in any case, until next time, I hope again that this video has been useful, and maybe I'll make more like it. We'll see. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time.